Aston Martin has built what it believes is the best Formula 1 facility of any team in its quest to become a championship winner, but new star technical signing Adrian Newey has issued what seems on the surface to be a devastating assessment of one of its biggest investments. Signing the ex-Red Bull technical guru was a massive coup for Aston Martin, and Newey's work since joining it in March of this year as managing technical partner has primarily focused on the 2026 car architecture, laying the right foundations for the first design for next year's big rules overhaul. As he's joining on such a senior level though, Newey's remit goes beyond his own drawing board work. He's theoretically there to help improve every aspect of Aston Martin's technical operation, and exposing weaknesses is a critical part of that. This is what happened in Monaco, where Newey told a small group of media, including the race, that the team's new driver-in-loop simulator, one of Aston Martin's most important tools, doesn't correlate at all and could be 2 years away from being optimised. Before we get into that in more detail, it's important to stress the significance of Newey's arrival. Newey knows what makes a top F1 team work. He understands what a class-leading technical organisation looks like, how to get the most out of all kinds of development tools, and how important it is for people to work together effectively and efficiently. And in the last couple of years, Aston Martin's gone from being a plucky underdog to somehow being less than the sum of its parts. Part of Newey's job is to work out what's gone wrong, what it's missing, and how to improve. Newey made his first Grand Prix appearance as part of the Aston Martin leadership in Monaco. He had a place on the pit wall, a desk in engineering, and roved around the grid with his famous notebook, jotting down ideas. Being trackside was a critical part of Newey's Aston Martin acclimatisation and assessment, as it gave him a more complete view of how the team's factory work combines with what happens at the circuit. But it's what's going on at the Silverstone campus that will have a bigger impact on Aston Martin's longer term prospects, which is why it's so fascinating that Newey spoke so candidly about the limitations he's already noticed. Aston Martin's brand new factory has been its home for a couple of years now, but big infrastructure projects like the simulator and recently completed wind tunnel have taken time to come online. The tunnel finally started playing a role in Aston Martin's development work a few weeks ago, whereas the simulator's been in use a little longer, since the end of last year. Newey says that some of Aston Martin's tools are weak, particularly the driver-in-loop simulator, which Newey claims is not correlating at all at the moment. He described it as a limitation to be working with a fundamental research tool that is so compromised, having previously hinted in an in-house interview with Aston Martin that the simulator was a great piece of hardware but without the software to match. This usually means the various models that attempt to replicate reality, like aerodynamics or tyre behaviour for example, just aren't of a high enough quality. And this software isn't just something you can buy off the shelf fully formed. There's an endless process of refining it and improving the correlation to ensure it's the most effective tool possible. That is what takes time, and there's no shortcutting the process. Using the driver-in-loop simulator has become an increasingly important factor in the wider development loop that teams undertake, although exactly where it fits in with CFD work and wind tunnel testing and the various iterations teams work through will vary from team to team. Essentially though, simulators can be used in two distinct ways: development work trialling different upgrades and setup optimization. The latter can include refining the starting setup going into a race weekend. So if Aston Martin's simulator isn't correlating at all, then a key part of its development process is feeding the team misleading information. It's meant to replace track testing, with the driver in the middle of it feeding back, but if the upgrades aren't being accurately reflected in the sim, or the tyres aren't behaving as they should, or the car's not reacting to elements of the track in the right way, all the data is compromised. This explains why Newey described Aston Martin as being a bit blind for some time in terms of both car and setup development. And there's nothing Aston Martin can do immediately to fix that, because Newey reckons it needs a plan to get to where it needs to be, and that's probably a 2-year project. Newey's warning about the quality of the simulator and the time it will take to fix is interesting in the context of his previous team at Red Bull. He suggests that while Aston Martin's tools are amazing, it's not yet optimising them, whereas at Red Bull, Newey and his colleagues were adept at using the simulator and other tools to make them greater than the sum of their parts. Newey implied Red Bull was able to mitigate the limitations of its own wind tunnel, which is a genuine Cold War relic that has routinely been criticised by those who use it. By comparison, Newey said that the Aston Martin tunnel is arguably the best in F1, just like he thinks the factory is the best in F1, but he cautioned that wind tunnels can actually be a slightly limited tool. He compared them to engine dynos and said you need them and would prefer to have a really good one than a not so good one, but it's the design you put into them that makes the difference. And that fits in with his suggestion that this team has expanded very quickly to become a very big organisation that in truth has been underperforming with its tools and personnel. So coming back to that prediction that it's a 2-year project to fix this, how bad is that in reality? Is it curtains for Fernando Alonso's hopes, for example, of a championship challenge next year? Well, not necessarily. First of all, as we touched on early in the video, this is exactly what Aston Martin wanted from Newey. his presence will shortcut the process of recognising where a fundamental limitation exists. Second, Newey's not saying the simulator itself is broken or a waste of money, it's how it is used that's the problem, which is probably why team principal Andy Cowell got a little defensive about the 2-year timeline. After being asked about Newey's comments, Cowell stressed it was known already that the tools take time to get right and improve the correlation. But Cowell doesn't think it's a 2-year process to be able to extract more out of the simulator, and he says that's not him and Newey disagreeing. What Newey's referring to is more likely optimising the entire process, the feedback loop of data, all the iteration work, to the level he thinks it needs to be, whereas Cowell sees it more as a matter of months to start being able to trust the simulator more with detail work. In Monaco, Cowell gave the example of the debrief there, including a discussion on what the simulator had said, what had happened at the track, where there was a mismatch, and what happens next, which will be to continue using the simulator, but with a little more caution about whether setup changes originating there are actually deployed at the track.
How would you like to win a Ferrari cap signed by either Charles Leclerc or Lewis Hamilton? We've got these incredible prizes to offer 2 lucky winners, courtesy of our friends at Monaco Inside Track, who offer walking tours of the roads that form that iconic F1 circuit, full of detailed insight about the history of that incredible race. To enter, all you have to do is be a member with us on Patreon. Then head to our competition post and comment with the name of the Ferrari driver whose signed cap you'd like to win. You can only enter once, but you are allowed to say both drivers. And as an added bonus for anyone in our Champions tier, you'll be granted a double entry if you take part. This competition is open to anyone with an active membership in either our Racers tier or the Champions tier. So head to the link in the description of this episode to enter before the competition closes on May 31st. And you can currently get 75% off your first month with us as we celebrate F1's 75th birthday. So hurry and sign up. Don't miss out.
It's worth pointing out that the simulator and wind tunnel were both used for the final aerodynamic mapping work on Aston Martin's recent upgrade package that was introduced at Imola 2 races ago. This package genuinely seems to have improved its fortunes in F1's midfield. That means the simulator has contributed on some level to the first truly successful upgrade package in probably 2 years. But as this simulator came online late last year, it can't be to blame for all of Aston Martin's development missteps in the last couple of seasons. Aston Martin has had a worrying trend of ineffective upgrades, ones that produced the anticipated numbers but also created time-sapping characteristics and imbalances. This led to Cowell reshaping Aston Martin's technical structure over the winter across the factory and trackside to make the feedback and engineering loop between the two parts of the team more robust. The emphasis now is on having more confidence in the parts before bringing them to the track, and a shift in how it had previously assessed whether something's actually better. Cowell said that previously Aston Martin had induced chaos at the track with extreme situations like swapping floors in and out race to race and even in event. That kind of thing comes from compromised tools or compromised understanding of them, or both. But again, Aston Martin would have been using Mercedes wind tunnel as a customer and an older simulator of its own when it struggled to kick on from its strong start to 2023 or even a solid start last year. So there might be an element of suboptimal tools there, but it would also be a procedural thing. Aston Martin Aerodynamics Director Eric Blandan reckons Aston Martin was actually derailed by its early 2023 success when it claimed 6 podium finishes in the first 8 races and was Red Bull's main challenger. That's because it got complacent and didn't review its processes as rigorously as it should have done. Now Newey's on board, he will undoubtedly be a great asset in doing that. That starts with frank observations about key tools like the simulator and emphasising that mega hardware is great, but it means nothing if you're not using it properly. And it includes making sure the team understands just how important this is, plus setting realistic timelines to address it. So what does all this mean for the looming 2026 rules, and the big chance Aston Martin has to bring all its investments together to finally achieve the success Chairman Lawrence Stroll demands? Well, obviously, the simulator is critical to doing that, but 2026 is just the start, and it sounds like Newey's having to manage expectations when it comes to short-term prospects. While Newey's remit includes helping improve all technical and engineering aspects of the organisation, sorting the 2026 car architecture has been his priority in terms of direct development input. Newey has offered some assistance on its troubled 2025 car in the form of lunchtime conversations with the small team still working on aerodynamic development of the AMR25. But next year's massive regulatory overhaul is a huge opportunity for Aston Martin, and Alonso's made it clear he's hoping to fight for a championship. Blandan recently called it a massive plus to have him focused on the 2026 car architecture with how he views car design holistically across aerodynamics and vehicle dynamics, and said it helps them to make a big step. but it's unlikely to be enough to turn what Newey calls an underachieving team into a world champion in less than 12 months, especially as Newey hasn't even had an ideal run-up to the new rules. Aerodynamic testing in the wind tunnel and CFD for the 2026 car was permitted from January the 1st this year, and initial concept work would have taken place even earlier. Newey didn't even start at Aston Martin until early March. From an aerodynamic perspective, Newey says he's a few months behind where he could be and is playing catch-up. And while he doesn't believe that irreparably compromises the 2026 project, he admits he has started it later than he'd have liked. But wherever Aston Martin starts the 2026 rule cycle, the ambition is for it to get to the top of F1 as soon as possible. Newey is a key part of that process, but as the plight of the simulator proves, so too is time.